Monday Night Football and Week 8 in the books. It was the Browns over the Bengals at home. Let's talk Nick Chubb. Let's talk potential trade partners for Kareem Hunt, maybe. The trade deadline. Roquan Smith now on his way from the Chicago Bears to the Baltimore Ravens. All that and more. Which team could be making moves on today's Peacock Williamson?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of P&W is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Okay, a lot of rumors out there, a lot of action with GMs and phone calls today as the deadline looms, Matt. But Week 8 now is finished up, and I think we both picked the Cincinnati Bengals in this one pretty easily. And the Bengals fall to 4-4. The Browns, who aren't dead, climb up to 3-5 now on the season with through 3 quarters, completely blanked the Bengals. The Bengals tried feebly to come back late with 13 in the fourth quarter, but 32-13 the final here for those Cleveland Browns, mostly on the power of the run game. Another 100-yard effort and a couple touchdowns from Nick Chubb.
Yeah, let me throw something at you before we get into this game, and I do want to talk about it's a big win for the Browns. So my wife is a Halloween lunatic. Our house has been basically decorated for 6 weeks. Every day something new goes up. We had a huge party here on Saturday. There's a giant inflatable Stay Puft Marshmallow Man coming around the corner of my house. You know, we trick-or-treated last night, as everyone does. But after trick-or-treating, it's 8:15 Eastern here. I go sit down, watch the Monday Nighter, do my job, and just see a lot of orange and black with a little bit of brown sprinkled in on these teams, and thought to myself, these two teams should play every Halloween. This should be like the Halloween matchup. What do you think about that?
I like it. Or like maybe Bengals Raiders or something like that.
Maybe.
But yeah,
a lot of orange on the field.
Nice.
Yeah. I think that'd be a great tradition. The divisional Ohio, Cleveland, Cincy, go back and forth Halloween madness, and have a big party in between or everywhere in between. Just keep partying it up.
Right. Like we see certain teams on Thanksgiving every year. Let's have the Bengals every year hosting the Browns or the Raiders or the right. Ravens or somebody dark,
there you go.
That would be like a nice spooky matchup. I like that. I like where you're at with the theme there.
More traditions, the better.
Jacoby Brissett, quarterback rating 133.7. A nice efficient game, 17 of 22 passing, 278 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions, only sacked a couple of times. I think this is that Browns team we saw a little bit earlier on in the season. Thought they might be okay with Jacoby Brissett as they get to the Deshaun Watson era of the Cleveland Browns. And man, I don't know whether to take away that the Browns team is better than they've looked recently, or if the Bengals team is just going to sort of flounder this season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to take away from it. It's a huge win for the Browns, keeps them very relevant. 2-6 is a nightmare. 3-5 is still within striking distance, especially with Watson coming back at some point. Brissett was fantastic. He really, really was. And he's had a couple really good games this year. Amari Cooper was phenomenal, caused all sorts of problems. The running game was as solid as always, 172 on the ground. Is that Kareem Hunt's last carry as a Brown? I think that's a possibility, but we'll see. The key to me, though, was both lines of scrimmage for Cleveland were totally dominant. And Garrett was a wrecking machine. Speaking of Halloween, he came in there as as Vecna from Stranger Things, and like he goes crazy for Halloween, which is pretty funny. I guess in his yard he has tombstones of every quarterback he's ever sacked, and so that was pretty funny too.
That's nice. I like
that. But in a way, this was almost like a week 1 game. Browns defense wasn't bad like it's been for much of the year. Garrett was dominant. They controlled things on the ground. But I mean that more in a negative way from the Bengals. I mean, 36 rushing yards in a game that was 11-0 at the half. I mean, they could have stuck with the run, didn't, had no sorts of running game whatsoever. Awful offensive line play. I mean, Burrow was constantly under pressure. He could have played better in his own right, and Chase was definitely missed. But their O-line was, not picking up stunts, getting beat one-on-one by Garrett and others. So this looked like week one Cincy when they were struggling, and looked kind of like week one Browns that was running the ball well and playing good defense, and Brissett played really well. So I don't know where to take these teams from here. Everything I thought I knew about them, I throw away.
Burrow sacked 5 times in this one, and it did feel like they missed Jamar Chase. Is that enough where the Bengals are like, man, okay, we don't have that element, and that sort of doesn't scare defenses now, and so defenses can play us a little bit more honestly and play, bring another rusher or, play a little closer to the line of scrimmage against the run. Is that enough for the Bengals to be that team where they're just
shouldn't have been this bad, though?
Yeah, right.
I mean, sure, he's a huge loss. He's a transcendent player. Where would Minnesota be without Jefferson, or if Tyreek was out of, Miami's lineup, or hopefully we don't see it if Kupp is not in the Rams lineup. But T. Higgins is no slouch, and Boyd and Hurst, and it shouldn't have been this bad. And it doesn't excuse the poor blocking. Doesn't excuse Amari Cooper running free time and time again. It was just a bad showing by Cincinnati.
Speaking of Cooper Kupp, I think they have good news with
do they? Good.
His injury. Yeah, it looks very good. There's not, nothing structural damage. I think it's, some soft tissue stuff for the most part. So rest first, and we'll see if he's able to play next week, but it's definitely not a long-term thing. And so they dodged a bullet there. The Rams did with Cooper Kupp.
Okay.
Speaking of the Rams,
could you see the Browns getting in the playoffs and getting this thing turned around? I still think that's a long shot, but I mean,
no. And I'm even worried about the Bengals at this point. And
yeah.
So when we fill out our Locked On Podcast Network power rankings, sometimes they put the link up there to do the voting. You could wait till Monday Night Football's over, vote before. I voted before Monday Night Football because I knew it'd be out treating with my son, and I had the Bengals pretty darn high, and I'm kind of regretting that now. It feels a lot different after Monday Night Football at 4-4 than if they were 5-3 with the way things had been going for them in recent weeks versus the start of the season for the Bengals. So now I'm back to just scratching my head with the Bengals, not knowing what's going on. A better shot than the Browns, but not much separates them in fact, there's only one team between them, the Colts. If you look at the playoff seeding at 3-4-1 between the 4-4 Bengals and the 3-5 Browns right now with tiebreakers. Obviously, it's way too early for tiebreakers, but I just pulled up the playoff seeding, and there's only one team in between those two teams.
I'm sort of in a similar boat. I hadn't filled out power ranks, but I've often had a discussion, who's number 4 in the league. I mean, we know who the top 3 are. And I thought Cincinnati was in the conversation, 24 hours ago. I can't say that right now.
And I think you would put the Bengals probably in the group with the Packers. Baltimore did. Baltimore is in 5-3 now, but I would put them kind of in a weird spot. The Dolphins maybe. Tampa's definitely another one. Teams that are there or right there, but they could be buyers at the deadline, and should probably be aggressive if they want to get there. Right. And maybe
I know we're about to talk Ravens with Roquan and all that, but I want to mention their schedule when we get there because it's remarkably easy. And the Bengals falling one more game behind Baltimore might be all it takes in that division for the Ravens just kind of moonwalk to the end.
Well, let's do that next. Okay. Let's talk Roquan Smith traded from the Bears to the Ravens. How's that look for the Ravens? How's it look for the Chicago Bears, who are loading up for a huge offseason upcoming in 2023? And some other rumors, some other teams. We'll go through those standings and see which teams should be buyers and sellers at the deadline.
I have late breaking news, too.
Here we
go.
Come
back with that.
I love it. And breaking news on the latest in the NFL coming up after I tell the folks out there about Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is daily fantasy that is made easy. How easy? Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. You're not even picking a full team of players. This is pick 2 to 5 players, and you pick if they will score more or less than their Prize Picks projection. That is it, and you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. if you're picking those 5 players, right, you can go up to 10 times your money. If you don't want to go that deep, you pick 2 players and maybe win a little bit less, but have better odds to beat Prize Picks projections on the more or less whatever they're projected. And look, you're not playing against other players either. You're just playing against Prize Picks and those projections that are available for the NFL. And it's not just football. There's college football, there's NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, PGA, you name it, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, disc golf, MMA, boxing. They've got projections for just about everything at Prize Picks. Withdrawals are safe and fast, and Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states, including Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50 more to play with. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Here we go. Breaking news, Matt. What do we got?
I do not know the compensation, but TJ Hockenson is on the move to the divisional rival Vikings. How about them apples?
The Vikings. Right. Okay, well, I can cross. Hold on a second. Let me cross TJ Hockenson off my list because that was a player I wanted to bring up today that had been rumored could potentially be available. And I thought there were some good fits for him. The fits I had on my list were not the Minnesota Vikings. Wow. Okay. TJ Hockenson to the Minnesota Vikings. I would imagine there would be pretty nice compensation here. Maybe not the compensation you'd be getting for a star receiver or a star pass rusher or something of that nature.
And still young.
Right. Still young, still has a lot left. Hasn't been quite the difference-making tight end that I think the Lions thought they were getting when they drafted him, but a two-way player that can block and they can catch the football and definitely adds an element to the Vikings offense. And we had talked about the Vikings as a team. It's like, they feel like the same team as last year, but they're playing a lot different. Now they're a better team than last year.
Yeah. And, Irv Smith did something to his ankle. I don't know the extent of it in that game. And maybe that was enough that they're worried about that. I thought if the Vikes were going to be active, it might be for a third receiver. I mean, Thielen's not young, maybe a Brandon Cooks, a Chase Claypool, somebody like that. But another weapon certainly adds up. I mean, they're extremely familiar with him, playing against him twice a year. Hawk has been a little disappointing. I mean, he was a top 10 pick. I loved him coming out of school early in his career. I'm like, this is going to be a George Kittle-like player, in terms of impact. He isn't there. I mean, he's the 7th best tight end in the league or something like that. But tight ends take a while. I mean, they usually hit their stride around age 27. That's about where he's at now, I would imagine. He is cost effective for the next couple of years. You can pick up his extension, his 5th-year deal. So I see the attraction. We'll respond tomorrow when we get a better idea of what Detroit got. But
I've got that for you right now.
Oh, Matt. Wow. Things are happening left and right here.
This is fun. This is fun happening live. According to Tom Pelissero, the Lions sending TJ Hockenson to the Vikings. Minnesota sends a 2nd-round pick this upcoming draft and a 2024 3rd-round pick to Detroit for Hockenson. And along with Hockenson, Minnesota gets a 2023 4th-round pick and a 2024 conditional 4th-round pick. Okay. So that means Hockenson and a 4th, and then a future 4th for a 2nd and a future 3rd. So they're moving up a couple of rounds in each draft. It's not just straight up pick. So that's how, because when I started that sentence, I was like, wow, okay, 2nd and 3rd, even though the 3rd's in a future year is a lot, but also picks going the other way too that are a couple of rounds later. So yeah.
Okay. I can see why Detroit would want to do that. I mean, they have to rebuild a defense in the next 365 days or 2 years or so. I would imagine they're still in the long-term quarterback sweepstakes, although their pick looks more and more like they could just get there on their own. I mean, they are not winning games, obviously. I don't quite understand why Hockenson had to go, or if he had to go, but they have a pretty good wealth of young receivers and Jamison Williams and St. Brown, so they're okay in pass catchers, to say the least. Makes sense. I think that's a fair deal. I can see both sides of it. This is obviously happening on the fly.
What's funny is TJ Hockenson was asked about this a couple of days ago, that his name had come up in some trade deadline rumors, and he said, yeah, it's always weird and you never want to be traded, but I can understand why my name would come up. So TJ Hockenson even gets it.
Yeah. Maybe is he unsettled? Does he think he should be used more? Is there any of that kind of stuff? I mean, I'm not aware.
I haven't heard of anything like that.
No, I'm not aware of a young up and coming tight end that needs to get on the field. I just didn't understand why he was on the block, but if you can get that back for him and allocate your resources over your, the rest of your Lions team over these next 2 years, that was a pretty good package in return.
I like this. I think it's a win-win. I like that the Vikings had to give up something, and it's going to hurt because those are, some high picks that they gave up, but they get a little something back, and improves the Lions draft process. They lost a good player though, so win-win. I feel pretty good about this. I feel pretty good about this trade for both teams there, and I don't think we're allowed to have trades anymore that don't have picks go in both directions. So
right.
The GMs are like, well, look, okay, here's the valuation, but we need this value, so we have to add this and this to get it to this, and they'll go down to the point on getting that draft trade chart points, the right number, throwing sixth, future picks, conditional picks, and so we'll see what this ends up looking like at the end, because one of these picks is conditional as well. But a lot of picks going a lot of directions. TJ Hockenson now a member of the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings won't be picking in the second round in the 2023 draft. Roquan Smith going to the Baltimore Ravens, Matt, from the Chicago Bears for a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick. How would you grade this one out? What do you think? First of all, we'll start with the receiving team here in the Ravens, obviously trying to stock up and get ready for that run, that playoff run that you mentioned that could be a lot easier now, looking at their schedule, looking at who they might get back potentially with injury in the second half of the year. What do you think, Ravens and Roquan Smith?
So I wrote an extensive article, of course, Steeler related, about young, high-profile, highly drafted linebackers. And I'm going to talk about Devin Bush here. And I talked about how unbelievably volatile first-round linebackers have been really for the last 10 years. And Roquan's no different. I mean, like, Devin White's a perfect example. His highlight tape is awesome, but there's times he runs the wrong way. Like, young linebackers are getting manipulated by guys like your Shanahan at an all-time high level, and it's become a really hard place to adjust to the league. But I do think Roquan's really hitting his stride now. I retweeted this from Pro Football Focus. I found it pretty interesting because it proves my point about what I just said, is Roquan Smith has more positively graded plays than any linebacker other than Bobby Wagner over the past 3 regular seasons. Okay. He also has the second most negative graded plays. That's what young, talented first-round linebackers do. They fly all over the field. They run 4.4s, but they don't diagnose and understand things yet. And I think he's starting to hit his stride and getting over the hump of the young, turning into an adolescent linebacker, I guess is a way to say it. And linebacker has been a major weakness for the Ravens, and Queen hasn't lived up to his billing, same exact reasons. And the guys next to him are just guys. So I think this completes their defense. That team, like my Steelers, don't change much year after year. They want their Ray Lewis, and Roquan has a chance to be that type of guy for them. It's a second and a fifth. We know the Ravens collect comp picks and mid-round picks like crazy. They probably have 4 other fifths as far as I know, or will whenever the draft rolls around. So what? The second, they're assuming is going to be late. I want to mention the Ravens' schedule. I think they're going to run away with the division. So it makes all the sense in the world. And you could re-sign him. That's the kicker, though. He wants to be like the highest paid linebacker in the league, and that seems rich for my blood for who he is at the moment. Or rent him for a second-round pick, send him on his way, and he turns into a third-round pick a year later, And so I think it makes a lot of sense for Baltimore, who's in it to win it right now.
Absolutely there. Do you like that schedule, right, for the Baltimore Ravens? Is it that easy for you to say, man, the Ravens are they already have a lead now. Yeah. They are the favorites by far to win that division?
I think so. So everyone saw Thursday night, they won a tight one against Tampa. To me, that was the biggest win of the year because they won that game losing Mark Andrews early on. Same with Bateman, who's going to miss some time. But here's the beauty of it is now they're sitting there after that win. They are, what are they? They are 5-3. Great. So they played last Thursday. Their next game is Monday night in New Orleans. So that's like a 10-game stretch. There's a mini bye right there, plus a day. That's great. Perfect what they need. Then they have another bye, so they play one game in like 25 days. And then they go Carolina, Jacksonville, Denver, Steelers, Browns, Falcons, Steelers, at Bengals to finish the year. Like, there's nothing in their way.
Do you think there's another move to be made for those Ravens before we move on and look at some of the other options that could be out there for some teams at the trade deadline? Because you hope you get Bateman and Andrews back after the bye week and a lot of this time off that's coming up for the Ravens, but maybe they're still banged up throughout the rest of the year. And Duvernay's done a really nice job and more than I think a lot of people expected there for them, but you don't want to rely on that. And the running game's been banged up. Do you think there's more to do for the Ravens maybe on offense now that they got a piece on defense?
You would think a receiver could be in the mix. They did very little this offseason at receiver. But if you watch them, Isaiah Likely just had a huge game. The passing game goes through the tight ends. Of course, Andrews number one, but Likely's a facsimile of Andrews. And they, less than any team in the league, have 3 receivers on the field. It's a distant last. So that's just not how they play. They also signed Deshaun Jackson, which doesn't move the needle for me, but they did it. And he is a field stretcher in the Marquise Brown role. But could they go after a Brandon Cooks or somebody like that and really make a run? I would understand it.
Next, I want to talk about some teams that still could make some moves out there and some players that could be on
I want to
the
talk Bears too, though, on this too.
What's that?
I want to talk Bears side of this a little bit too.
Right. So,
we'll come back to that.
And also just looking at what the Lions have as well. So let's look at that side, the draft capital now that both the Bears and the Lions have after being sellers. Who else could be sellers coming up on this episode of Peacock and Williamson? BetOnline.net is your number one source for football and the start of the new basketball season. Not just betting either. You want to be informed when you make those bets, and you can find all of that information at BetOnline. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all sports wagering information with live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including not just NFL, not just NBA, Major League Baseball, World Series going on, MMA, boxing, golf, you name it. You can even play Vegas-style casino games and table games there at BetOnline. So get over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. If you think some team is either a lot more fun to bet on now after the trade deadline, or maybe you are fading them post-trade deadline, you can get in on that action at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's start with the Bears here, Matt, and quite a bit of draft capital now. And, Ryan Poles obviously did a lot of work this offseason. They've moved some contracts, moved some players. They've got tons of cap to spend, and they've got a ton of draft picks now to spend to really get this rebuild going in 2023 into hyper mode.
Yeah, I certainly understand what they're doing. They lost two of their best obvious defensive players in the last couple of days, in Quinn and Smith. Maybe they're their 2 best players overall, but I don't think they had any intentions of extending Roquan. He's asking for a ton of money. He's not happy there. So turn it into what looks like a late second and a 5th. I get it, and you're not going to, maybe you don't want to allocate, money towards linebackers in general anyways. Maybe that's just not how this front office looks at things. He'll be missed, and it creates another need, of course. But now, if you look at what they have in terms of compensation to rebuild this thing, I'm pulling it up on my phone now because I retweeted this from my buddy Field Yates. So right now they have their own first, which should be pretty high, their own second, which should be high, Ravens second, which I assume will be late, a third, their own, a fourth, their own, a fourth from the Eagles in the Quinn deal, their own 5th, and the Ravens 5th. So that's a lot of draft compensation. Plus, they lost guys like Allen Robinson last year and didn't bring anyone in. So I would imagine there's a comp pick or two in those top 5 rounds mixed in as well. And over $100 million in cap space next year. So this team's going to look drastically different, drastically younger. I think we're trending towards at least one more year of Fields, which I think he deserves, but that could go south, I guess. So it's going to be difficult. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, we told Bears fans from the start this year, just survive 2022. Don't ruin Fields, and then go make a move. Like, could they be the team that trades for Tyreek or Adams or AJ Brown? Not those 3, but the next version. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they have the cap to make a move like that and bring in a star player that maybe another team can't pay. And
exactly.
they have that, they have utmost ability to do whatever they want, and they can get creative as well with picks and dollars to do so. And then looking at the Lions side of things after their trade, they've got even more draft capital because they've got extra first round pick already coming from the Rams in the Matthew Stafford trade to finish up that trade this offseason. So the Lions now have 2 firsts, 2 seconds, their own and the Vikings. And if you want to go up and get a quarterback, if you want to do a lot of things, the Lions can do that. And that might have been what this trade was about, to making sure they have the best opportunity to do exactly what they need to do if quarterback is in their future. And you would think that that would be certainly an option for them to do in the draft. But, maybe they feel like they like Goff enough to where they don't have to do that. But they could be major players. They will be major players again in the draft. And by the way, getting Jameson Williams back next year. Right. Yeah. So they get
their
first round pick.
They're 1-6. I mean, they're probably going to pick in the top 5, maybe even 1. They may not even have to trade up for their quarterback. They may, so all those other picks could go to defense. They may look a lot different too, in a good way.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if Dan Campbell's going to be there though.
They got to figure. So yeah, they got to make some hard decisions too. Who's in charge of a rebuild? You don't want to have somebody spend all of this draft capital they have the last 2 years, and all of a sudden you're like, actually, we're going to change it up and go with a new GM and new coach. And like, well, you got to let the new people draft the stuff, right? So
yeah, right.
Looking around the league a little bit from Monday Night Football, I've heard a lot about both, published rumors and stuff. I've heard aside from that Kareem Hunt is involved in some trade talks. And I think Monday Night Football, they had to get through that, make sure that Hunt was healthy after the game, but especially Chubb was still healthy after the game to make the Browns feel better about moving on from Kareem Hunt. So Kareem Hunt's definitely a name I would throw out there. And I think there's numerous teams that could be looking for a running back, Matt. According to reports, the Rams were the team that offered 2 first-round picks to the Panthers for Brian Burns, because there was those rumors that the Panthers had turned down 2 1s. Now that means if it was the Rams, they were both future ones. So we're talking about going into 2025 with first-round picks. Would the Panthers say yes if it was this year's first and a next year's first instead? So basically, the Panthers are kind of listening on some of their other younger star players that they haven't traded yet, but they would have to be blown away is the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, I would need a lot for Burns or DJ Moore. Back to the Browns real quick. I meant to mention this when we were reviewing their game. This Deshaun Watson situation has them pretty screwed, and they did that on purpose for people that remember this 11-game thing, because they can't roll his contract situation to next year, and they're very cash strapped next year. I mean, this was the in it to win it year with the Browns, and they don't have their starting quarterback for 11 games. So it might not even shock me if Jack Conklin or somebody like that, somebody that's making money, that's been around the block and is a little banged up from time to time, could get moved as well.
Any other trades, any other names you like out there before the deadline?
Real quick, and I'll be honest, I mean, the days leading up to the trade deadline, I never like, because everyone just puts out all kinds of crazy trades on the internet. But one I saw that, of course, won't happen. How about Derek Carr to the Jets?
Oh, my gosh. Derek Carr,
awesome?
Potential quarterback trade at the deadline. I don't think we've seen one of those since Jimmy G about 5 years ago. That would be a lot of fun. Should be fun. Matt and I, of course, will have it all broken down for you tomorrow. Get your Twitter questions in. Leave a comment with your question for our Wednesday mailbag episode back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williams.